Hi folks, HR Funk here, with what I think is going to be my last installment in my series on upgrading my recently acquired Remington Model 700 rifle. And that doesn't mean this is the last time you're going to see this rifle. In fact, I think it's probably going to make regular appearances here on the channel, but this is going to be the last installment in the series that I started last November, where I started evaluating the rifle and then eventually upgrading it. And I didn't want to leave this series without going back and taking a critical look at some of the components that I added during the upgrade process, so that if any of you are interested in either conducting a build like this yourself or at least using some of these products, you have a little bit more information to be able to know what to expect when you put them on your rifle. So here we go. So one more time, here is an up-close look at my newly enhanced rifle. And one of the things that I don't think I mentioned previously during this series is the fact that I was trying to perform these modifications on more or less a budget-friendly basis. And beginning with the rifle itself, I did not go with the most expensive version of the Remington Model 700. I went with a step up from the bottom tier. This started out life as a Model 700 SPS Varmint. And if I had this to do over again, I would go with the Model 700 ADL Varmint. That would have saved me some money on the overall build. And as it turns out, I ended up not using the bottom metal that came with the SPS version, which really is the only difference between the SPS and the ADL. Both have the internal magazine, but the SPS has that floor plate that can be opened to empty the magazine, whereas the ADL has to have ammunition cycled through the action in order to unload it. So had I known going into this that I was going to begin a project like this, I would have gone with that less expensive version of the rifle, still gotten the same quality barrel, the same action and everything else, but not spent quite as much money on components that I was not going to end up using. Moving on to an up-close look at the scope and the scope mounting hardware. This is a scope that I had on hand, so I did not have to acquire this extra for the system. This is a Leupold Mark IV 8.5 to 20 power scope, so it has a lot of magnification, and this is probably not the last scope that will ever sit on top of this rifle, but it was one that I was familiar with. I knew it would allow maximum precision when it came to testing this system, and I thought it would work very well for that purpose. And here's an up-close look at the mounting hardware. For rings, I'm using Leupold Mark IV rings, and these are also items that I already had on hand, but I've used Leupold Mark IV rings many times and I have always been very happy with them, so I didn't see any reason to go with anything different for this build. For the base, I used a Midwest Industries aluminum base, and I could have spent quite a bit more on just the base for this rifle. This was $40 or $45, I don't remember off the top of my head. But it was a pretty economical base. It works very well, and I don't have any concern with using aluminum rather than steel. Now, if this was a system that I was going to have to worry about dropping out of airplanes or maybe being run over by a tank or something like that, I would have probably gone with a steel base, but I'm not concerned with that for this system, and I think the aluminum base is going to work just fine. And again, I think it was pretty economical. For $40, that's a good base. For the stock on my system, I went with the Magpul Hunter stock, and this stock was something of a compromise. It's a good stock, I like it, and I also have one on my Ruger American Hunter rifle, but this was essentially the lowest price stock that I could go with that would give me the features that I wanted, beginning with an integral aluminum bedding block. I did not want to go with a stock that was going to require glass bedding or anything else, and this has that integral block that allows me to torque the action screws down and make sure I have a good solid mating between my stock and my barreled action. The stock also is at least advertised by Magpul as being adjustable, but I think it might be more accurate to say it's reconfigurable. When I think of an adjustable stock, I'm going to change the camera angle right now and I'll show you another stock that I think actually fits the definition of being adjustable. So this is a Magpul PRS stock that I have on the rifle that's hanging on the wall behind me. And this one adjusts very quickly for length of pull and comb height just by turning these dials. That to me is an adjustable stock, and it makes it very convenient, especially if you're changing positions and you have to make quick changes to your stock, or if you're training with body armor on and then deploying with no body armor, or vice versa, training with no body armor and deploying with body. Anything that's going to require a change to this is going to be very convenient when all you have to do is turn those dials. Now let's go back to the Magpul Hunter stock and take a look at how it differs from the PRS. So I think for the Hunter stock, Magpul was very definitely trying to build this to a certain price point. Obviously, they could have put dials into this stock just like they did on the PRS, but rather they went with a system that would allow the stock to be changed so you could make the length of pull longer or shorter, or you could make the comb height higher or lower. But as I said earlier, it's not really adjustable so much as it is reconfigurable. In order to change the length of pull, you have to remove a screw and then either add or take away some of these spacers that you see, and by doing that you can make the stock longer and shorter. But if you're trying to do this quickly, either as you are on your way to deploy the system, or if you're moving from one position to the other, truthfully, moving from one position to the other, it's virtually impossible to change on the fly. You have to stop what you're doing, remove the screw, put the spacers in or take the spacers out or what have you, make sure you have everything just where you want it, and then put the screw back in. Similarly, the comb height can be changed, but the way it's changed is by removing the comb that is currently installed and replacing it either with a shorter or a higher option. That also requires removing this same screw, also removing the spacers as well as the butt pad, and then finally removing this stock. So again, it's not really a bad system, but as I said, I think it was built to meet a certain price point, not really built to be the best option possible for adjusting either comb height or length of pull. Another thing to be aware of with regard to the comb height is the comb that comes from the factory with the stock is the one you see installed right here. This is the only one that comes with it, so you don't get the shorter option and the taller option. When you purchase your stock, you have to purchase those separately. When we look at the relationship between the bolt and the comb, you might be able to notice that when you take a cleaning rod, if you were cleaning the rifle, there's not much room to get it in here. Now, I'm able to clean this rifle when I need to without removing the comb, but I can't use a bore guide. The bore guides that I typically use with my Model 700 rifles will not be able to be installed in here and then still have the cleaning rod make it past the comb and into the bore to be able to clean the rifle. So in order to use a bore guide, I have to remove this comb, meaning I have to disassemble the stock in the manner that I talked about a couple of minutes ago. So just be aware of that if you're using one of these stocks. They are good stocks, they have a lot of good features, but there are just some things that you might want to know about before you purchase one. Another thing pertaining to the stock that you might want to be aware of is that although there is a rear sling attachment point, in fact there's one on either side of the butt stock, there are no corresponding sling attachment points at the front of the rifle. Now on the forestock there are M-lock slots on either side and M-lock slots on the bottom, so it's not really going to be difficult to add a front sling attachment point, but none of those M-lock sling attachments or rail sections or anything else accompany the rifle stock when you purchase it. Those are all separate purchases. Now, given the fact that Magpul manufactures the stock and they also manufacture M-lock rail sections and M-lock sling attachments, it would be nice if they packaged some of those components with the stock just for the customer's convenience. And if they charged a couple of more dollars for that, I'm okay with that. But it would be nice not to have to make those separate purchases before you could configure the rifle the way you want it. Now fortunately, I had a couple of M-lock rail sections on hand, one of which I used to attach the bipod here at the front. The other one I will probably use to attach a sling swivel here at the front, and I'll be able to add the sling with no problem. But as I said a moment ago, it would just be nice to have those in addition to the stock when you make your initial purchase. Here's an up-close look at the Magpul trigger guard, magazine well, and magazine for the Hunter stock. This was also an additional purchase. I think it was $60 or $65. And I cannot imagine a much easier way to add a detachable box magazine to a Remington action. This was extremely simple. It went right into place. The magazine goes in, it functions the way it's supposed to, everything feeds. So this has been great. I really like this addition. This was what I used to replace that bottom metal that I was talking about earlier, and I don't think I'm going to miss it one bit. In fact, I think I'm going to like the convenience of the detachable box magazine. Also, I wanted to mention that the Magpul magazines go for about $35 a piece, $40. Maybe you can find them a little cheaper than that online. I came across these. These are Amend 2 magazines, and I'll try to get these where you can see them rather. These are also AICS pattern magazine. They are 5-round magazines. They are made in the US, and they're quite a bit less expensive. These things go for about $20 online. In fact, I think Optics Planet right now has them for $20. So if you're looking for a little bit less expensive magazine option, you can get the Amend 2 version. And so far, these have fed, functioned, and done everything they're supposed to in the Magpul magazine well, so they work very, very well for that purpose. If you've been following this series, you already know that I replaced the factory Remington X-Mark Pro trigger with this Trigger Tech adjustable model, and so far I really like this trigger. This was an incredible upgrade over the factory trigger, and it feels great. I have not adjusted it one bit since I originally installed it, and I don't know that I will. That's just a tremendous trigger. The price on this I thought was reasonable. I want to say it was around $180. Again, I didn't look any of these up ahead of time. I'll just annotate them in the video as I go, but I really, really like that trigger. I mentioned this Fab Defense bipod previously in an earlier video, but I wanted to touch on it again because I really do like this bipod. I have a full review on these bipods from a while back, so if you want to get more information, go back and take a look at that full review. But these things offer a lot of adjustability. They will tilt, they will pan, they extend. They have sections you can add to make the bipod even higher. These, I think, are very high quality bipods. They go for about $125, which as bipods go these days is not really too bad. When you consider some bipods go up into the several $100 range, for $125 you get a lot of bipod there. And the final item I'll mention is the Control Solutions muzzle brake, and I have an entire video dedicated to this muzzle brake as well as another model that fits an AR-15. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other than to say this has been a very worthwhile addition to my rifle system. The main thing that I noticed from this is the stability in my sight picture. When I'm shooting long range under recoil, I don't have nearly as much deviation, and I'm able to get follow-up shots on target much more quickly than I can when I don't have the muzzle brake installed. Also, recently in a live stream, I had an interview with Jeremy Kahn of Control Solutions, and we discussed these muzzle brakes as well as rifles and ballistics. If you missed that, go back and watch it because it's packed with information of value to precision shooters. So at the end of the day, I have about $1,200 or $1,250 in this entire system, not counting the scope, the muzzle brake, or the bipod, and those items would be an additional cost for virtually any rifle system. And that price of about $1,200 to $1,250 is pretty much the same as the factory version of the Remington Model 700 that comes in the Magpul stock. So some of you might say, well, what was all this worth when you could get that factory version that has essentially the same type of equipment? First off, the factory original version with the Magpul stock is something I haven't even seen since Remington started to rebuild the Model 700 rifles. So availability is one issue. The other problem with the factory original version is it has, I believe, a 20-inch barrel, and I wanted the longer barrel for the improved ballistic performance. So I was able to get that with this system, and I was able to actually build this from one of the base models rather than wait to see if I could find one of the factory original Magpul versions. This made a fun winter project, and I ended up with a rifle that's now capable of sub-minute of angle performance, and with ammunition that it really likes, it's down around half-minute of angle. So I'm very happy with the way this rifle is doing. That's a significant improvement over the way it was performing when I first brought it home in its factory configuration, and I could not be much happier with it. So there you go, folks. That's going to do it for my series on enhancing the accuracy of my recently acquired Remington Model 700 SPS rifle. And by the way, I don't think it's really accurate to call it an SPS anymore. I think nowadays I'm going to call it the Model 700 HRF. If you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 7% off your purchase from Optics Planet. And one last time, I want to say thanks to the folks at Optics Planet for partnering with me on this project. Also, remember House of Pain. You can go to House of Pain Armament or House of Pain Munitions and use my discount code there, which is HRFunk, and that'll save you some money from your purchase from House of Pain. And remember the Target sponsor, folks. Go to Target's online, check out their inventory, and see if they have anything that's going to meet your Target needs. See you next time, and until then, with an accurate rifle, good shooting. Bye-bye.